Welcome, friends. I am Cindy Thompson, and this is a Resilience Project. This is a space where stories are shared and possibilities are discovered. I invite you to partner with me in cultivating resilience among humans, one conversation at a time. Today, I am interviewing a very special friend of mine, Karen Peters. Karen is a registered clinical counselor in private practice at Thrive Counseling and Wellness, and she is passionate about supporting parents. She provides counseling to couples and families, creates online mental health-related courses, and has a new podcast called Parenting in the Trenches. Growing their family through adoption, Karen and her husband Chris have two daughters aged 10 and 13 years old. From the outcome of their adoption journey, Karen and Chris chose for their girls to maintain a relationship with their birth families, and both daughters have affirmed the value of open connections and ongoing relationships with each of their birth families. As a transracial family, they've had the eye-opening and heart-wrenching opportunity to learn and actively dismantle their white privilege as parents while celebrating and instilling Black culture and identity in their beautiful girls. They value the village that surrounds them and recognize both the inherent wound in the adoption experience as well as the opportunity it provides for lifelong, secure connection. With such an important topic on the table today, I encourage you to listen with an open heart and to notice if parts of this conversation create feelings of discomfort. So Karen Peters, I am just honored to have you here today, and we are really diving into an area that is pretty cool for me, and to include this topic as one of the things that we can learn from. You and your husband, Chris, have been together for how long?
15 years married.
Okay.
16 and a half together.
And you together have two daughters, and they are 13 and 10, Matea and Shaylin. Tell me about your girls and how they came to be part of your family.
We are an adoptive family, and our method of growing our family, I think a lot of people assume is born out of grief and loss, which for many it is, where they have tried for several years to have children biologically and then had to shift their version of growing a family. We actively tried not to grow our family biologically because when we met, it was within, I think, our second date that it came up that we were going to adopt children. It was never on our hearts to do it any other way.
Wow.
And so shortly after we were married, we started the process knowing that it was going to take, what we heard could take years and years and years. The beginning of the process was really deciding what country to pursue. And a lot of limitations happen based on state by state rule or country rule, which says like you have to have a combined adult age of 60 or more. Like there's all sorts of random things that kind of whittle away. So we had a number of wishful plans in place that didn't pan out, and it directed us where we needed to be. So we ended up adopting through the state of Florida, through a private agency there who matches back birth families by reading profiles of whoever has submitted their paperwork. And then birth families get to choose who they feel is the best fit and they're most comfortable connecting with. So in both cases, our kids are not biologically connected to one another either. So it started there. And then after our first daughter, we tried again through the same agency, and it took 3.5 years before Shaylin arrived to us. And in between, we had, it's funny, when traumatic things happen, you swear you're never going to forget. I'm actually not positive how many adoptions fell through for us, but I think that it was 5 or 6. One just before our first daughter came to us, and then the other ones in between. And to the point where the match that fell through before Shaylin was born, it became a conversation where we were revisiting, is this meant to be? Should we be doing this? Should we be pursuing this? It's too much. And we said one more try. And that was agonizing. That last 6 months was just painful. But we don't think often about that anymore, which is feeling like a bit of a miracle.
That's a blessing in itself. And what a roller coaster that must have been for you, to just get your hopes up and then to have it fall through. Can you walk through that for us and what that was like for you?
Yeah. So with Matea, we had some warning. Her birth mom was 7 months pregnant at the time. She was parenting 7 kids at the time, had been through the adoptive process before placing a child with a family in California, somewhere midway in that birth order. And she was pretty certain she knew what she was in for. This was the right decision. And so she made her choice at 7th month of pregnancy. And we got to know her while she was pregnant. We got sonograms, we got information, and we got to be part of her pregnancy, which felt pretty unique because a lot of the time you don't have a ton of warning, but it does vary. For some people, you'll know in that 3rd trimester, and for others, you get the call after, which was the case for Shaylin. They had an adoptive plan that was much more organic. It was somebody in their neighborhood who was a friend, longtime friend, who was planning to receive Shaylin into their family and share childcare and do all of that. It was going to be a very united front. And something shifted in a family emergency right before Shaylin was born. And from the hospital room, Shaylin's birth mom had to phone an agency and start the process. And so we heard about her 2 days after she was born. And then at 10 days, she was with us. It's a whirlwind. And really the roller coaster is in part because you never have a date. You never know. So there's 2 phone calls that happen. There's the phone call of you've been selected. You are a match. This is our next steps. Here we go. And that's when bonding starts. You fantasize about what this is going to look like. You pick bedroom colors for the baby. You set the crib up. You purchase tickets. You tell family. All that stuff. And then in the cases where it didn't happen for us, in one case in particular, we had introduced Matea that she was going to have a brother. There were baby showers. We had gifts. We had name picked out, Eli, and Eli didn't come home with us. We were on the way to the airport and told she's changed her mind. And the crash after that was hard. The second call that happens is the call of get on the plane. He's been born and it's your time to fly. And then there's a third piece of the process that happens that finalizes everything. And depending on where you're adopting from, that process can take several months to almost a year to finalize, in which case, if there's something that the agency didn't do properly, that can be contested if, say, another birth parent comes into the picture or a grandparent steps up. And in some cases, after parenting for 3 to 4 months, you can have your child pulled, returned. And that, I can't imagine the devastation of that, but I have some acquaintances and a bit distant friends that have experienced that. Yeah. So the gamut's huge. Like it's just the unknown. The first time we adopted, Matea, really from the time we started the process to having her, it was less than a year, which in the whole scheme of things was actually pretty quick. The second time, though, then waiting 3.5 years with a lot of bumps and bruises along the way was a whole different experience. It felt like an eternity. So,
yeah. Well, I'm trying to imagine you're going to pick up Shaylin. Mm-hmm. You're told, come on over to Florida. We're ready. We have a baby for you. Yeah. And after those bumps and bruises and that roller coaster you were on in between, I'm just imagining how you might have just been holding your breath the whole way.
Yeah.
Waiting for the plug to be pulled on you.
Well, it's interesting how people deal with it differently, right? Because Chris had his head in the sand. He fully says, like, I wrote an article on this the other day. I asked him, like, so what do you remember? He's like, oh, I just detached completely. Checked out. I can't. Please add that to the article. Let the dads know. This is what it's like, because his anxiety shut him completely down. I will not feel until this is real. And then it takes a long time to warm that back up. You don't get the baby and suddenly you feel. It's months of growing that back to coming back into your body and saying, I'm allowed to attach and allowed to feel. I remember consciously deciding, waking up every morning and saying, in 5 years, when my child's been with me for 5 years, I do not want to look back on this and say I held back from attaching to them as soon as I could. So I just chose, I knew that it could be devastating again, but I just made the deliberate choice to say, I'm going to be excited today for her because she's going to need that from me when it's all said and done. And now I'm thankful for that.
I bet.
But all that pouring in, I have no child to funnel that toward for the ones that fell through. I still think about those kids because I imagined them in our home, right? And they are living anonymous lives right now to me, right? And yet I attached to them for a couple months at a time. They became mine. So
I hadn't thought of those as true losses for you. And as you speak about it, it might be similar to parents who have lost a child or had a miscarriage in between. So Karen, you and Chris also chose an interesting road through the adoption of keeping it open where the parents, the biological parents, remain involved.
Yeah. So a couple decades ago, that was not cool. We don't talk about being adopted. They're ours. We love them just the same. It's going to hurt them to know that they were quote unquote given up, right? A lot of old terminology. So I think in an effort to protect people, felt like the best thing to do was just pretend that we were always theirs. And this is how family was designed. And we don't need to talk about adoption. So the closed route was the better one. Let us everybody get closure and carry on as though this is fine. We've come a long way. We're not there yet in the adoption field in that realm, but there's been a definite pendulum shift to understanding the ins and outs of what it means to have an open adoption. And I'll say this, it's always on a continuum. Lots of people will say we have open adoption, and that means very, very different things. It's super unique and it's shaped by each individual set of families. So for us, we went into it knowing we wanted some version of openness. And we actually walked in going, whatever is possible, we want. So let's go to the nth degree of openness if we possibly can. So in our profile letters that are used for birth families to choose you, we use language like, we want to blend families. We're not taking your child. This is us parenting, not knowing who we were going to be matched with. So that comes with complex variables of risk and all sorts of stuff. But we made the decision to trust that wherever possible, with some good boundaries in place, was going to be the best option for our kids. And that went from theoretical to very real. So Matea's birth family is huge. We visit regularly. We'd go more. And in fact, a number of years ago, Chris and I paused to think, should we move? Should we live there? I wouldn't say it's not feasible. If we really wanted to, we could pick up and move. We'd make it happen. Our kids are very rooted in their community and in their school and in their friendships. And that would be a really difficult thing for them at this stage. But that was our mentality of where we confuse, we fuse. Where it's healthy and in the best interest of our kids, we are not going to, as adoptive parents, get in the way of their bond with their birth families. So with that in mind, it shaped itself. I would say for Matea, she's mostly connected to her birth siblings. There are ones that are in her age range that she very much looks up to and loves. The way that's expressed is less in day-to-day contact and more when we visit. She has the sleepovers with them and plans game nights and swims in the pool with them and leans on them while they look at their phones and pick music together. And that's where the bond exists. And she finds rest in some of her identity there. And for Shaylin, it's different. It's very fused with her life. So if she has a question, she gets on Facebook with her birth mom and asks her a question.
Oh,
And
neat.
it could be anywhere from something complex like, do you know about where my birth dad is right now? Or it can be a question of like, do you like pepperoni on your pizza? And sometimes it's just because they want to dance at the same time. So she'll get one of them on the phone and they do a TikTok dance and they giggle and then they go, okay, I got to go for dinner. And they drop off. So I consider her birth parents and their extended family as like siblings. We feel like siblings. They're sisters and brothers to me. So that has become and grown over time. In reality, that's what that looks like. You know, we celebrate our birthdays together. We express that we miss each other all the time. And I have a genuine longing to just be near them.
How fantastic. Well, and I can hear the value that brings for everybody involved, not just the kids, but also their families, but also that connection between yourselves and the birth families. You come from a fairly big family yourself, Karen, and I think about the value of having this extended picture, that there's more people out there who have my back at a time where we tend to raise our kids to be somewhat independent and insular in our immediate families. What a gift that seems to have brought for all of you.
It definitely has been a gift for all of us. It has provided a path for some healing where I think that we used to think about it as if we cut it off, we can heal. If there's closure, we can heal. Keeping it open has meant that our kids don't have two distinct identities. They get to be whole. And there's still brokenness. There will always be. It's inevitable that when you adopt, there is inherent grief and loss attached to that early attachment rupture. And that's for both the birth family and for our kids. And so I think about the analogy of kind of like banks to a river. They just need some safe boundaries around it and the water will flow. But if we put up a dam, that water is not going to stop flowing. It's just going to rush through, break it. It's going to come out some other way. So I think that our openness as a structure has given them the opportunity to let the water flow. And I see them processing stuff that I think that they couldn't otherwise process and make sense of and organize in their own minds about who they are and what matters to them.
Well, and what stands out for me about that is the parent who then gave up the baby at birth for any number of circumstances. And I can think of somebody that I've spoken to recently who for 29 years grieved every January because that was the month her baby was born. And as a late teen, she could not have made that decision to keep the baby in her reference, but grieves it every January for 29 years until finally they got to meet. And similarly for kids who there's this big pressure, who are afraid to tell their adoptive parents. They want to know their family. They want to find out more about their background and do they look like their parents and are they out there? And there's a lot of mystery about that and a lot of pressure. And I just think how beautiful the way this has played out. And it's not done. It's an ongoing journey and an ongoing story. But it sounds like this has brought a lot of richness for the girls as well.
I love the permission you highlighted because I don't want our kids to feel the burden of secrecy. What does open adoption mean to them? And I think a version of openness is being open about the adoption and the lack of information, the lack of connection, that you as adoptive parents still have a beautiful role in taking the burden of secrecy away and letting them grieve with you. You get like, you can be their support in grieving the loss of not knowing. I don't have answers to that. And that is brutally hard. And that, you know, how we shape ourselves in part is knowing things, but it's also in being able to say openly that we don't know things and we're not alone in that. So to give kids the opportunity rather than just go, we don't know enough, so let's just not bring it up. That I think sends a message to our kids implicitly that, that's not something it's not safe to talk about. And if I do, I'm going to hurt them. I'm going to reject them. I hear this a lot in an older generation of adoptees who were born into the closed adoption mentality. who then have this adult experience of, I'm going to pursue and figure this out. And the journey to reconnecting with any version of a family member, birth family member, brings with it such complexity of, I wait until, like a lot of people wait until their adoptive parents have passed on to pursue that out of care and compassion and respect. And I think about those 60-year-old people going, man, I wish you had been allowed. Somebody had said to you, I'm not threatened by that. You need this. I support you. That's where we were. Like any cultural learning curve, change of system perspective, it's taken time and we're still growing in that. But we trusted that that was the right route, but we knew there was risk. And I am so glad that we jumped the ledge and did it, because I continually see these moments where I go, oh man, that would not have been a thing if we didn't have this, you know?
Yeah. Well, it makes me wonder, what are some of the pieces of evidence, and you've maybe named a couple, where Shaylin, I think you said, will just contact her mom and want to have a dance party together.
Yeah.
What are some of the pieces that you would say support that you can say, yes, we did the right thing, that you might have noticed along the way? Can you think of a couple of more examples that maybe would give people encouragement of that?
Well, there's a significant one. Shaylin struggles with her mental health. She's not a neurotypical kid. So her brain works in mysterious ways to us because we don't have that experience, lived experience. And her birth mom does, and they get each other.
Oh.
And it's normalizing when they connect for Shaylin to see somebody live their brain out in the same way.
Yeah.
And they celebrate it. And they also have an acknowledgement of reality of its limitations and its struggles, the challenges that come with it. And so when we were struggling, when Shaylin was about 3 or 4 years old, and we were reaching out for some community support around understanding this and managing some of the stuff that felt unmanageable, I got on the phone with actually her birth grandma, so her birth mom's mom. I was sitting outside. I had locked our kids in the house so that I could get some privacy. I was sitting on the picnic bench under our willow tree, and I cried. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. Help me. Like, what is happening here? And I described it, and she goes, oh, girlfriend. She's like, this is what I raised for 20 years. Like, just, and I could just breathe a bit of a sigh of relief, like, okay, somebody understands this in the full picture. And she said, what do you need? And I said, I don't know, but we're looking for some help. They're going to need some information from birth history. I need like whatever you can give me. And she's like, okay, do you want me to tell you? Do you want me to write it down? Do you want to get the psychiatrist on the phone? And I will just tell them everything. I will say what medications have worked, what haven't worked. I'll say, you know, what reactions have been, what diagnosis we have. I mean, who gets that? This was like in the moment what we needed. And it was not something I could have made up or dug up out of the register, you know, online. I needed family. I needed her to tell me firsthand what happened and give us some context and meaning to this and some forward direction about, okay, so what helped for you? What took you in the wrong direction? And that was huge. That was huge. And so it was interesting too, because I showed up at BC Children's outpatient and I said, so I can get her on the phone. Do you want, do you want her? Like, she's waiting. She knows I'm at the, they're like, whoa.
She's
like,
on speed dial.
Yeah, she's on speed dial. It's totally true. So yeah, I get some looks because I know that this is not particularly typical, but it is highly, highly valuable. And it has brought us a long way.
Well, and you and I both have worked in the mental health field, so we understand the benefit of that family history, genetics, and that bigger picture. And so it might have taken much longer to really understand Shaylin at her age than to have that reference and to know what her mom might have gone through her grandmother's lens. And that is pretty cool. Yeah. We don't always get that. Anyway.
It's a
Yeah.
huge gift.
So Karen, like I think about all that you've been through, and parenting, period, is a journey. What are some of the challenges that you've been learning along the way in adopting these two beautiful girls from these families in Florida?
Well, there are a lot of things, but I would say that one of the most important things that I would want to highlight is we have learned so much of what we didn't know. We have a transracial family. My husband and I are as white as they come. I have a full Dutch background. He has a full Mennonite background, Dutch, German kind of background. And we didn't know what we were doing. So when this began, we had very thin bones of a structure of like incorporating culture, understanding that your kids, if you have children of a different race, what that's going to mean for what you celebrate, what you learn about, how are you going to plan for that? And I remember having conversations with our social worker about, they would ask us, so how are you going to incorporate your culture in their lives and teach them about it? And I remember saying, well, it's age appropriate. I would think about like, as it comes to being celebrated, and they're like, nope. Try
Wrong
again.
Answer.
Wrong answer. Beep. So I was like, okay. And we had to really wrestle with that of like, how do people who are not Black teach Black culture to their children?
Yes.
And my version of that when they were 6 months old is very different than what it is now. And I would say it's less about how they've developed and more about how we've developed. We have figured out as parents how little we knew, how ignorant we were, and what automatic responses we had and assumptions we had that went unchecked because nobody had to hold us accountable. And what I've come to learn is that the sad part for us in this story is that it shouldn't have taken adopting Black children to wake up, but it did. So it's a sad part of our journey, but we look at that every day about how do we keep making this about us? We have drank the water all our white lives in white bubbles with a whole ton of privilege and supremacy and superiority. And I would never have said that that's what I was doing. No clue.
We only know what we know.
We only know what we know. I do think, and I wrestle with this a lot about humanity, that when something feels relevant and relatable, that's when it becomes meaningful to us and it matters. And when you have no Black people in your world, nothing makes it feel like it matters to you. It doesn't affect your world that you know of, right? But in the meantime, we're benefiting from it all the time. So it's in us and we don't know it. And the microaggressions that are constantly poured out by us, and we just don't see it. So we don't know what's happening. We have our ideas of ourselves that we are kind, loving, caring, equal people. It's not reality because it can't be because of how we were raised. So owning that has been quite the journey. Understanding the unique values that being Black holds and celebrating that and incorporating that has been a huge part of our journey. I think every parent kind of feels limited. There's always something you're not going to know enough about.
Yes.
But this is part of who I am that can't know something that is a part of who they are. I can never know that. I can never feel what it's like to be Black. And I want what they feel to be Black to be beautiful. But how do I instill that when we live in a world that doesn't hold that up? And they see it every day. And it's not just because Black Lives Matter hit and it's on the news. It was before that. It's a struggle to figure out, how do I see things from their lens when I really can't? But I feel like I should for their benefit, So we have to think about things that we otherwise would not have had to think about. How do we safeguard our kids? It's a real balance of how do we protect them, but not let them live under a white cover, because they're going to grow up and live in a world that's unfair. And they need to see it, identify it, and deal with it. They're going to have to find ways to be fully them. Like, for example, my daughter, she's 13, she wants to be independent. She got excited the other day and said, Shaylin and I are going to have a sleepover. We're going to go walk to the store, to the grocery store by ourselves. We're going to pick out candy and we're going to stay up till midnight. And that's how it's going to go, Mom. And I go, cool. That sounds amazing. Okay. So my first thought in my stomach, that's where my thought began, in my stomach, was it turned a little. And I thought, okay, what do I need to say to prepare them for this? My stomach turning was because I had to place myself in the Black experience and say, if you get questioned at the till, or if somebody's looking at you a little too long in the aisle while you're holding candy trying to decide, I tell them things like, don't pick the candy up until you've made a decision. Oh. Because it looks like you're taking it. You're pocketing it. You're going to wait until somebody goes around the corner. So they're going to stand there and they're going to watch that you're not putting it in your pocket. So all those small things, I talk them through before sending them out the door.
And is that informed by an experience you've had with them or that you've seen, or is it a fear?
It's informed. So I'm part of a huge group of 500 people who are transracial adoptive families. And we share these experiences all the time. Names that our kids get called, cars that follow them down the road, store clerks that don't trust them when they enter the door. They are hypervigilantly watching them. And it doesn't matter what age your kids are. They just make instinctual assumptions about, we're going to pay closer attention here because it's their other. And we don't know how to trust that. You know, if a stranger tries to touch your hair, what do you say to them? Those are just mainstream, everyday kind of conversations of, and I know as parents, we're constantly learning. I'm reading all the time. I'm having conversations. I'm listening to Facebook posts. I'm hearing Black friends talk about, yeah, but don't forget that. When Black Lives Matter was first emerging on the main scene, we attended protests with our kids and demonstrations, and we made signs, and I ordered stickers for a van. And because every day when our kids go to school and they get in that van, I want them to know that it is not a one-a-day thing, an ongoing learning. So every day I have to think about, what do I want my kids to hear, see, and witness in me, changing my problem for the benefit of them so they can be treated equally in the world. And those stickers went up, and I have never, ever had a road rage incident until those stickers were on my van. And the next day, driving to work, a guy in a pickup truck came flying up behind me and slammed on his brakes and then steered right around me, cut me off, flipped me the bird, started yelling, pretended to slow clap. I think often we are quick to write those things off as random. And it's probably not about race. Stop making everything about race, you know?
Yeah.
I can't make that out to be anything but that. And that's just one example. And my heart was racing and I was scared for my safety. I thought, I don't know what this person's capable of. At first, I thought I should take those stickers down. It puts us more at risk. And then I thought, nope, I need to feel this every day. And that's the lived experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a real reminder.
Yeah, that's the lived experience that we need to undo.
Yeah. Well, I'm just imagining just the layers, Karen, of parenting itself is hard, it's messy, but then the conscientiousness and the sense of responsibility you feel to bring a voice to this and to help inform your girls and give them the language to protect themselves and to advocate for them and with them for just being human first and foremost. I can't imagine.
It's layered, and the layers increase the more you look at it, right? So it's a fight every day in myself to make sure that I don't just say it's too much, I'm turning it off. Because I have the privilege. If I want to shut the news off, I can shut the news off. If I don't want to deal with it today, I don't have to deal with it today. Our kids will never have that right to just go, you know what, I'm going to take today off from being treated this way. They're on guard all the time. You know, we don't have kids of driving age, but a huge conversation that happens that's become normal for us, preparing their rights for when you're pulled over. You know how nervous you are when you're trying to drive for the first time, and can you imagine right from the get-go having to also remember that police aren't safe necessarily? Like, I don't want our kids to be scared, but I can't pretend that that's not a risk, because that ignorance going in and that kind of Pollyanna feel is actually putting our kids at more risk. If they just assume they can do what they see me do. We got pulled over the other day, Matea and I, on our way home from work, and it was a routine road stop. And I would never have said this or thought to say this if our kids were white. But here's another example of, I was like, oh, opportunity. We're going to have like good cop interaction here. And in my head, I was thinking, it's not even that I'm educating Matea, I'm educating the cop. I was like, here's my chance to say, hey, here, you could do something here. And that highlights like what your responsibility is for making this interaction safe. And so I pulled down the window and I said, this is exciting. So we've never been pulled over before. I would love you to show my daughter what this should feel like. Oh, and he was caught off guard. Like, I just want to know if you've been drinking. And I said, I get that that's what you need. You need to know. I said, I can reassure you I have not been drinking. Happy to take a breathalyzer. But I need you to show my daughter that this is good. And he looked her in the eye and said, it's so nice to meet you. You've done nothing wrong. Move along. Have a good day. But like, this is why we shouldn't have to be having these conversations to buffer. But this is the reality of the everyday. Yeah. And it just scrapes the surface, you know. My kid throwing a tantrum in chapters meant that people were starting to dial the police because they thought I was kidnapping her. Wow. Right? That was a routine awareness that I had, that I put up with a lot in stores and in public pool change rooms. Because if I dared during a tantrum to just go, enough is enough, I'm picking you up, we're going to the van, that looked to the average bear with no context like, what the heck is this white woman doing? Whose child is this? You could see them scanning, like, who do they really belong to?
Interesting.
Yeah. But that's how we had to always have in the back of our minds what this looked like to people.
So if you were to speak to parents who, I'm going to ask this in two parts.
Okay.
Parents who are thinking of adopting, what you would recommend. And the second part is, what advice would you give if they're adopting interracially?
Adoption is complicated because it is so beautiful and it is such a gift, but it cannot be untwisted from the pain of it and the brokenness of it. Adoption is not by design. It is by necessity. And I don't think they can be detangled. But if I go back to our decision to adopt, I would have thought that it could have been detangled, that whatever we poured in, I don't know if I would have said it erased it, but it would have been the medicine for it. And adoption doesn't medicate the wound. The wound still comes with. And I think that I wish I had known more about that. And I wish that my connecting with other adoptive families in those early years was more about that and understanding that in more depth than it was about how am I going to braid my daughter's hair and what products do you use? I think we missed the boat on really getting early enough on the complexity of what it meant for our children. And you do have time because they grow slow. It's not that it's like, oh no, if I didn't know it right out of the gate, I can't learn it. But I do think that the earlier you get it, the better your kids are off in that journey.
Yes.
And one of the things that we also learned is that it takes its toll on the couple's relationship. And there's so much work you can do to prepare for that. When you're waiting for that phone call, it's so hyper focused on that baby showing up. And in the meantime, you don't have a clue yet, if you haven't been parents, what parenting feels like and how never ending it is, right? And how complicated it is. And if you have kids with any kind of special needs, it just amplifies that. So when you adopt and you're waiting and that period feels endless, I would encourage people to use that time to scaffold their relationship, to strengthen it beyond what you think is necessarily needed, that you need emotional bank accounts that are overflowing to do really well in the aftermath of that early phase of adoption, because the paperwork does not end, the pressures do not end. There's a whole year's worth of stuff that you won't know till you're in it, but strengthen the surroundings and the relationships so that you have what it takes to do it well and feel supported. Yeah.
And anything specific to interracial adoption that you would want to speak to?
Yeah, so that goes back to that struggle of you don't know what you don't know. I think about having a lot of grace for couples early on. I think it's our responsibility in some way as people who have experienced it to highlight those things and not just say, you'll figure it out, because there's a whole village of adopted kids who will benefit from you knowing these things earlier, and not just thinking, we'll get to that when they're 5, 6, 7 and they have questions about their culture. But right now, what do I need to do to work on myself to be open to cultural differences, to cultural value differences? How am I going to live that out every day? So I think about, for instance, for our kids, we celebrate Kwanzaa. That happens the week between Boxing Day and New Year's Eve. And it is born out of a tradition from the States that celebrates African American history and cultures and values. And those 7 pillars are things that we're in an ongoing way trying to use as our frame of reference for life and growth for our kids, to instill those things every day. So what does creativity look like every day? What does self-determination look like every day? What does cooperative economics look like every day? What does community living look like every day? How do we live that out? Because those are the values that not only came with your people from Africa, but they are what held you through impossible slavery, right? And that legacy is intergenerational trauma that we need to be aware of, our biases we need to be aware of in how we parent kids of any other ethnic background. And so if we're adopting from China or from the Philippines, or what in you resists welcoming that into your life, and asking those questions right from the get-go, not just assuming it'll kind of magically figure itself out along the way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and I really appreciate your wisdom and your experience that you bring to the table as well, Karen, not only from a mental health perspective, but also what you've been learning about yourself as a person through this and as a couple. And I wanted to pull out just quickly the piece around community and village. And I can hear that you have surrounded yourself with those who have come before you in this journey. Continue to learn and support one another.
Yeah, we have what we call our Harambee family. And while we only gather for camp once a year in the summer, there are pods of us living across BC and Alberta that routinely connect, and our kids have genuine bonds and relationship with one another that helps them be free of some of that constant layer of having to be aware of their skin tone and being different than the majority. And when they're together, they don't have to think about that. And while I wish that was the everyday, we just have to mindfully make sure that wherever there is an opportunity for that, we nurture it and we make sure that it's available to them the best that we possibly can. And I think village is layered, because if I think about how their birth families in Florida, when we visit, it is village. We rent huge vans because transporting, you never know who will be there when we say, let's go bowling. There's 15 people and they're in and out rotating of new family members every time. That's village. And we get a taste of that village when our kids connect with their birth families, and we get a taste of the village when we surround ourselves with other interracial and adoptive families. And they have an education village. Our kids' school works really hard to be multicultural, to value and celebrate unique traditions. All of those villages bring so much safety, I think, for our kids. And it brings a lot that they need to do well. And then we've learned along the way that we needed it all along too, and didn't know it.
Well, and it's a reminder that we as parents don't always have what we need as we go into parenting. And no matter what the challenges are that people might be facing, sometimes we're learning about them along the way, as in mental health concerns or learning challenges. We sometimes are flying by the seat of our pants trying to figure it out. Going into this decision to adopt interracially is an opportunity, it sounds like, to learn as much as you can in advance and surround yourself with that village and to be open to learning so that we continue to grow in this. Because you and I also only know what we know. And you've been on a great learning curve here in your parenting journey. And as I listen, I think about how much I don't know.
The opportunity to understand the picture of resilience in our kids' lives. It's been another one of those reminders of like, yep, sit in it. Sit in it. It's not organized. It's huge. It's layered and it's got threads all over the place. And it is what it is. And I'm going to get it wrong. And it's okay. And I have to be okay with that, and then be held accountable and move forward and be brave enough to say, I can own the mistakes and I'm going to do better. I'm going to walk forward and I'm going to do better. And there's a layer of parenting to that. And then there's a layer of just who we are as humans, standing up for one another who have been marginalized, and changing that. So,
yeah, I really appreciate that reminder. And sometimes it's just meeting someone like yourself and what you and Chris are experiencing and what you're wanting to do to support your children as they grow in that community, to be able to give them what they need to at least feel like they have some resilience, to have the languaging, to have the support, and to know how to respond as they go along, is such a blessing that they have you as parents to support them and their surrounding family, that big, beautiful family that is there for them also.
Thank you for having the conversation. This is a gift to me to be sitting in this space having the conversation with you about it. I love it. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you, Karen. I don't know about you, but I just had to sit and breathe after this interview. I am not sure if you can listen to this conversation and not feel something shift within you. Karen really painted a picture of their lived experience raising these two amazing individuals and the responsibility she and Chris feel to show up every day. Upon reflection, I was wondering how many of us also might feel that same sense of commitment and responsibility in knowing that the birth parent chose you to raise their child. For those parents out there, we recognize how beautiful, challenging, messy, and rewarding parenting can be. with the additional layer of interracial adoption into the mix, Karen shed light on the immense learning curve they've been on, but also the amazing gifts they have received in return. I think every parent should surround themselves with a village of cheerleaders. Imagine how encouraged we might feel. Remember, you only know what you know, but don't settle there. Based on this conversation, what beliefs might need to shift for you? I appreciate Karen's question. What assumptions do we make about the other? Karen's sense of love, commitment, and responsibility to her daughters is just so evident in this conversation. I think most parents worry, will our love be enough? I believe that any parent that is putting this kind of investment and thought into the well-being of their children is demonstrating a selflessness and commitment to doing their best. Isn't that all we can ask? Be patient, dear parents. You are playing the long game. By showing up and getting in the ring, you are going to make a difference. I found a quote by Isabella Rossellini, and it goes like this. Adoption carries the added dimension of connection not only to your own tribe, but beyond, widening the scope of what constitutes love, ties, and family. It is the larger embrace. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Resilience Project. We would not be doing this podcast without you. If you or someone you know has an inspirational story or is helping to build resilience in their community, please email me at cindy@aresilienceproject.com. In fact, email me either way. I would love to hear from you. Also, check out my website, aresilienceproject.com, to meet the amazing people who have joined me on these podcasts. Last but not least, a big thank you to Doris Media House for their editing support. As you go about your week, I invite you to think about one way you can continue to grow your resilience muscle. What is one thing you can start doing today? See you next week.